27% of all deaths that happen in India happen because of a cardiac issue. India is now the diabetes capital of the world. 1 in 3 adults in India is facing some form of metabolic syndrome. Invisible sugar. These are foods that don't look like sugar. They definitely don't taste sweet. But when you consume them, they act exactly like sugar in your body. When you digest them, they're converted into glucose, which requires a massive insulin release by your pancreas to manage that glucose. Blood glucose is one of the last markers that gets impacted.
It's a lagging indicator.
It tells you that the disease has taken place. It's not a preventative marker. Rotis typically tend to spike my blood sugar quite a lot. I think it went, in 150 milligrams per deciliter. I had the exact same meal the next day.
Yeah.
But the next day, instead of sitting on my couch, I actually went out for a walk, a 20-minute walk, and I saw that there was about 20% reduction in my blood glucose level. You need to be the CEO of your own health.
Hey, so good evening, Karan, and lovely finally seeing you, and also the book that we have been working for a while. So I have a list of questions for you today, where we'll discuss a little bit more about the book and about your inspiration behind the book as well. So question number 1, you open the book with a very personal crisis, that particular phone call from October 2022. Can you take us back to that moment, and also what shifted inside you that made all of this into a mission?
So Utkarsh, I moved out of India roughly 8 years ago. And I can tell you one thing on behalf of all the people who have moved out of India. If there is one single fear that they have, is receiving a phone call from back home that something is not well. I can speak on behalf of all the Indians who have moved abroad, that this is perhaps at the back of their mind all the single time. Unfortunately, I received that call, I very distinctly remember, on 15th of October 2022. My mum, she called me crying, and she was basically in Delhi Sir Gangaram Hospital's emergency room. And she told me that my father, he had a cardiac arrest. But they had already tried CPR twice and, defib. But, he wasn't, they were not able to revive him. So the chances were obviously not very good. And, my entire life changed in that single moment. I basically hung up, and I, without even packing a bag, I called a cab and I went to the airport, and I had no ticket, obviously. I said I'll figure it out when I get there. I took the first flight back to Delhi and I came here. When I landed, I was then informed that they were able to revive my father after the 3rd CPR and defib attempt. He was in ICU, he was in coma state. And unfortunately, at that time I did not knew this, but now I know because I researched so much about it. One of the most common side effects of giving CPR or defib to a cardiac arrest patient is that they can develop hypoxic brain injury.
And what does that mean?
What that means is that because your heart stops pumping, there is no oxygen or blood supply going to the brain. And brain is one of the most hungry organ. It is by mass only 2%, but it takes 20% of the energy. And if brain is starved of the raw materials to make energy, then that's devastating. And basically that raw material is oxygen, glucose that is transported through blood, right? And when your heart stops, obviously it stops pumping, and that raw material is not going into your brain. And some parts of the brain are extremely energy hungry, like the parts that form memory, parts that control your motor functions, etc. And these parts, because they are extremely energy hungry, they are the first parts of the brain to get impacted. And without getting into too much science, basically our brain cells, take these raw materials and they produce energy. That energy is used by every brain cell has has a mineral pump which basically keeps sodium outside of the cell and potassium inside. But once the energy supply is cut off, you have a flood of sodium going into the cells, and wherever sodium goes, water would follow.
Yeah.
And that's when that's what brain edema is. The cells basically get swollen because of the water,
Yeah.
and that causes a severe damage. And unfortunately, my father, he was out of supply for a fairly long time. We don't know the exact number of minutes, but it was definitely more than normal. So his brain was very deeply impacted, and he that's why he was in not a great shape. He was in a coma state, and normally you would think that once heart starts to work again, the blood flow is blood supply is normal, and then things should be fine. Actually, what is counterintuitive is that once the blood supply is restored, the oxygen goes to these damaged cells and it causes further damage because there is a thing called reactive oxygen species, and that causes further damage to the cell. That's why the first week or so for such patients is extremely critical, because even if the supply is restored, it doesn't mean that things are fine now. So unfortunately, he suffered massive brain injury because of this. He was in a coma state for almost a month in the hospital in ICU.
Yeah.
But after a month, doctors did a pretty good job, and he was stable enough. His vitals were stable, and his doctors, one of the best doctors in the country, they basically told us that, look, we don't want to keep him in the ICU because there is a pretty good chance that he can develop an infection, an ICU infection, which is very normal to happen.
Yeah.
And anyway, patients like him, they have very low immunity, and that could be lethal. So we don't want to keep him unnecessarily in ICU anymore. So we suggest that he's stable, his vitals are stable enough. We suggest that you take him home and you set up an ICU at home, basically.
Got it.
That sounded very, easy at that time, but that was probably the toughest thing that we have done, me and my family, we've done in our entire life. So we brought him home, and we basically set up a small ICU at our own home, and we ran that home ICU for another 6 months.
Wow.
Because that's long it took in his recovery. And even after 6 months, when he was better, he had lost a lot of his brain functions. So that was the starting point for me, to start thinking about my own health. And I'm very curious by nature, so I wanted to delve deeper into it, and I think that's where my journey with health started.
Got it. During the recovery process, was there a turning point when you realized that this is probably not a family issue, but a national crisis in the making? So was there a specific point during the recuperation of your father's journey?
Actually, as I delved deeper into research and when I looked at the data, I was shocked to learn that India is at this point of time facing its worst metabolic epidemic. What happened with my father, cardiac event, it falls under the umbrella of cardiometabolic disorders, so metabolic disorders. And as a country, we are right now facing an epidemic of metabolic disorders. 27% of all deaths that happen in India happen because of a cardiac issue.
Oh, wow.
India is now the diabetes capital of the world. There are 101 million diabetics, diagnosed diabetics.
Yeah. And I think 136
pre-diabetic diagnosed pre-diabetics.
Pre-diabetic, yeah.
These are diagnosed.
Yeah.
There was some study which basically said that 57% of the people who had diabetes did not even know that they had diabetes. So undiagnosed is a completely different ballgame. Yeah. And there are well-published studies which I have also cited in my book. 1 in 3 adults in India is facing some form of metabolic syndrome. So this is a national crisis as we speak, and it's unfortunate that it doesn't get the right attention. And that was the motivation for me to also write the book.
Got it. And when you started your research, and I think especially with your Instagram channel, you experimented repeatedly on yourself via CGMs. So any one data point or any any trend that you saw in that data which completely changed the worldview for you, especially around Indian diets, maybe?
Yeah. Look, in India, we have this mentality that, if it's ghar ka khana, then it's healthy.
Yeah.
Things are far more complicated than that. I'm not at all prescribing that you should eat outside food. You should most definitely eat ghar ka khana. But it's far more nuanced. Just because it's a ghar ka khana, it doesn't mean that it is good for you.
Yeah.
I have by now experimented with, on my own, I've tested more than 300 Indian foods on my continuous glucose monitor, just simply because I was curious and I wanted to understand the metabolic impact of all the foods that I'm eating. And I must say there were a lot of surprises, a lot of shocks. So there are quite a lot to answer. To give you a more specific example, and this probably will be controversial, but if you take fruits, for instance, we treat fruits as as, I don't know, like a medicine. They're like considered super healthy, but most of the fruits that we consume today, they have been very carefully engineered. One, for increasing the yield, so that the manufacturers can produce more fruits, and second, they have been engineered for better taste, and that often means sweeter taste, because if it's sweet, people will eat it more. And we eat fruits as if we polish off bowls of fruit, right? But they cause a massive blood sugar spike, and at least for me, I've tested almost every single fruit, and they cause a massive blood sugar spike. Then fruit is just one example, but our diet is predominantly dominated by what I call in my book invisible sugar. These are foods that don't look like sugar. They definitely don't taste sweet. They're not like white powder substance that we associate sugar with. But when you consume them, they act exactly like sugar in your body. When you digest them, they're converted into glucose, which requires a massive insulin release by your pancreas to manage that glucose. And these foods are there in our day-to-day life. For example, roti, rice, and bread, which is the staple of our diet. Most of us consume it, in every single meal. There is either roti, rice, or bread. These foods are extremely high in carbohydrates. They are converted into glucose as soon as they're digested in your body, and they require same amount of insulin as sugar. So our diets are. I'm not saying, by the way, that you should stop consuming them. But you should not consume them so generously. Is what I've noticed in my experiments.
A lot of people might think right now at this stage that, okay, if I stop eating roti, rice, practically a significant chunk of the Indian meal is out. Right? Because that's a stable part of our diet, whichever region we consider of the country. So is there a way to consume these, of course, in a portioned manner, but also maybe combining them with certain things that help reduce the glycemic load?
100%. I have a very simple rule, and I came up with this idea because I think it's simple to understand for most people, which is basically a traffic light formula when it comes to carbohydrates specifically, right? So, like traffic light, red, orange, green. Red means no, orange means careful, green means, you can go, right? So, it's very easy. You can classify carbohydrates into these three groups. I will start with the green group first, which is basically vegetables, fruits, and legumes. If you are metabolically compromised or if you have any metabolic syndrome, then go easy on fruits. But if you're metabolically healthy, then it's fine. The reason that these three food groups, vegetables, fruits, and legumes, are in green is because in nature, these carbohydrates come with fiber built into it.
Got it.
And you can eat them generously in your diet.
But just for reference, the fruit juices don't count in this, right?
100% not. Fruit juices, perhaps, if not more, it's perhaps as bad as drinking a cola, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you are taking out, and we drink it, in the name of vitamin, we drink it as if, it's a health miracle. But you are basically taking out all the good parts of fruit, all the fiber is gone, and you are essentially extracting the sugar
out of it, yeah.
And that's what you're consuming. It's going to skyrocket your blood sugar. So if you're going to consume fruits, then definitely whole fruits.
Yeah.
Fruit juices are, in my opinion, even if you're metabolically healthy, I think you should stay away from them. So these three food groups get a free pass. You can consume them liberally.
Okay.
Then we come to the orange group, which is basically a food carbohydrates which do not have as much fiber as the group 1, and your roti, rice, bread would fall in this category. Even if it is a whole wheat flour, you might think that it is whole wheat and it has a lot of fiber in it. I'm sorry to tell you that fiber has been taken away during the processing, even if it is whole wheat.
Yeah.
So any type of flour, regular flour, I mean, bread or rice, these are in orange category for me.
Yeah.
Now, what does the orange category mean? It means that you should have them judiciously, carefully, and if you're consuming them, consume them in a smaller quantity, and ideally, the timing of consuming them is super critical.
Okay.
Try to consume them during an activity.
And could you elaborate?
Well, I have a whole chapter dedicated to it. Activity has a profound impact on our blood sugar levels, simply because when you put your skeletal muscle is the biggest glucose dump in our body. 70% of the glucose running in our bloodstream is taken up by our skeletal muscle. I can explain more about this later, but if you put your muscles to use, you are basically depleting the existing glycogen store, and you are opening the glucose receptors on your muscles to absorb glucose from your bloodstream.
Yeah.
So if you time this orange group around your activity, so let's say if you go to a gym, then try to have your carbohydrates around that.
Got it.
And you will see that that is metabolically much more friendly. Or I have one very simple rule in my book. If you go for a 20-minute walk after your meal,
yeah.
And especially if your meal contains any of these, roti, rice, bread, then after the meal take a 20-minute walk, because it will activate your muscles. They will consume blood glucose. So that's the orange category. And to wrap it up, finally, the red category are basically processed carbs.
Got it.
If I start naming them, the list would not end.
Yeah.
It would include anywhere from your chips to
basically everything we find in the shelves.
Basically anything that comes packed with a barcode in a box is processed carbohydrate.
Yeah.
That is a no-go for me. That's the red category which you should stay away from. So if you follow this red traffic light logic, you can manage your carbs really well, in my opinion.
Got it. And I think in the book you call insulin resistance one of the central drivers of India's lifestyle epidemic that we are seeing today. Can you, for the viewers, explain it in a very simple manner? And also maybe as a follow-up, how does insulin resistance impact maybe the primary lifestyle diseases that we see?
Yeah. Look, before we talk about insulin resistance, we must talk about what insulin is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think of insulin as a medicine or a drug that they take, that diabetic people take, right?
Yes, yeah.
Which is true, but we all need to understand that insulin is actually a hormone that is produced by our pancreas, our pancreas are tucked right behind our stomach. So it's a hormone produced by our pancreas. Okay. Now, every time we consume a carbohydrate, that carbohydrate, as it is digested, it converts into glucose in our bloodstream. And once it is converted into glucose, high glucose in our bloodstream is extremely toxic. So our body works really hard to maintain a very narrow range of blood sugar in our body,
which gets tested as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Blood sugar.
If your blood sugar goes low, that could be very dangerous. If your blood sugar goes high, that could also be very dangerous. So our body works really, really hard to maintain our blood sugar in a narrow range. Now, when we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar goes up, and our pancreas detect that our blood sugar is going up. Our pancreas release insulin to manage the glucose in our bloodstream. Now, how insulin manages blood sugar is that insulin plays multiple roles in our body. It's one hormone that practically touches every single tissue in our body, but it is most famous for bringing the blood sugar down. And the way insulin does that is that insulin will go to various tissues, and it will open the doors of those tissues for those tissues to consume take the blood glucose out from the bloodstream. So, for example, insulin will tell skeletal muscle that there's excess glucose running in the bloodstream. Open your doors and let the glucose enter skeletal muscle. Likewise, it does the same for fat cells as well. Our fat cells, they also consume glucose, and with the same mechanism. And what happens is that these tissues, they can either use this glucose and convert it into energy immediately, or they can. If our body doesn't require excess energy, they will store this in them. In muscles, they will be stored, as glycogen, for example. Now, what has happened is that due to our modern lifestyle, our insulin levels are chronically elevated. Let me give you an example. Most people, when they wake up in the morning, they'll have a breakfast, which would be something like poha or idli or paratha or whatever, which is extremely carbohydrate rich. Now, as they digest that, the blood glucose levels start to go up. Insulin shows up to do its job. It takes a couple of hours for blood glucose levels to come down, but insulin will stay for a little bit longer because it wants to make sure that all the glucose is now out. Now, by the time insulin has done its job, we will have a mid-morning chai or rusk or tea or tea with biscuits or something, and usually with sugar. What that means is that our insulin did not even have the time to come down, and now we have put more sugar, more glucose in our body. So insulin it probably goes even higher, right? So it stays up. Then it has not had time to come down, and now it's lunchtime, and we will have rajma chawal, which is again carbohydrates, right? So our insulin is now again up. It has had zero chance to come down.
Normalize.
By the time it's been a couple of hours, we have digested our lunch, and it is about to come down. We will eat a samosa, evening snack, and then insulin is.
There's a chai there as well.
Exactly, insulin is still high, and then finally we will finish our day with a dinner that will have a couple of rotis with some sabji, maybe a little bit of protein coming from paneer or whatever. But again, it's a very carbohydrate-rich meal, right? So if you see, our insulin levels are chronically high throughout the day, going into our sleep as well. Now, this chronic elevation of insulin is called hyperinsulinemia. This is what causes insulin resistance. Insulin is what causes insulin resistance. If you keep your insulin high throughout the day, and this happens day after day after day, your cells or your tissues will be like, boss, we have had enough energy. We do not have more space. Fat cells will be like, look, I've already expanded a lot. And fat cells, by the way, can expand a lot. They can expand 100 times, which is perhaps remarkable. But still, it's like a water balloon. It will burst. And it doesn't want to burst, because if that cell bursts, there will be whole other consequences. There will be so much inflammation in your body. So what it does is, as a defense mechanism, that cell becomes resistant to insulin's effect. And that is insulin resistance.
Oh, wow. And how does it lead to, let's say, the other diseases? Because it basically translates into, let's say, a cardiac arrest, or maybe a fatty liver disease, or in certain cases, I read in the book, reproductive diseases as well, which was pretty new to me, that could be linked to insulin resistance as well.
I call it one dysfunction with multiple diseases. And insulin resistance is the common denominator among most of the metabolic disorders. it, it can manifest in various ways. One of the most direct manifestations of insulin resistance is diabetes.
Got it. Yeah.
So diabetes is, so when we talk, before someone becomes a diabetic, they are declared pre-diabetic.
Yes.
When their blood sugar levels are at a certain range. Actually, pre-diabetes is not early diabetes. It's undetected insulin resistance of 10 to 15 years. And insulin resistance is one of the most direct manifestations of that is diabetes. What happens is that initially your body tries to compensate this hyperinsulinemia by producing more insulin.
Yeah.
So, your pancreas detect that, hey, I'm producing insulin, but the cells are not listening. They've turned deaf to me, and blood sugar levels are staying high.
Yeah.
High blood sugar levels are lethal or toxic.
Yeah.
So what they do is they are as a beautifully designed mechanism in our body, our pancreas overproduce insulin.
So trying to shout more so that
exactly
these muscles can hear.
And for some time that works, by the way. So for the first 5 to 10 years, that works.
Okay.
What that means is that overproduction of insulin is happening. So your insulin is steadily going high. But it's taking a lot of toll.
Yeah.
But it's still able to manage you manage your glucose levels. So the glucose levels still stay low.
Oh wow!
But insulin levels are high because because body's still doing what.
So it doesn't even show up in the blood reports then.
That's exactly the problem with the markers that we test for. Blood glucose is one of the last markers that gets impacted.
That's a lagging indicator of
absolutely
of diabetes.
It tells you that the disease has taken place. It is not. You don't. It's not a preventative marker. So. And very often it's too late, by the time, so first 5 to 10 years, your insulin will keep creeping up and up and up, and it will manage your glucose levels. So your glucose levels are still low.
Yeah.
You will test your fasting glucose, it will be normal. You will test your HbA1c, it will be normal. But over 10 to 15 years, your pancreas will be like, boss, we can't, overproduce so much. Your beta cells would start to die. And that is when you will start to see that now, even that enough insulin is not able to keep the glucose at a stable level. And that is when, the glucose will start rising.
And that's the first time it will show up in the blood report.
Exactly. And this progression, and there are research around it that I've cited in the book, it takes anywhere from, and it could vary from person to person, but anywhere from 5 to 15 years. Typically, it's like a 10-year progression. Wow. So it's 10 years lost where you could have prevented from becoming a diabetic.
Yeah.
And then one fine day, you will go to your annual checkup and, your blood glucose levels will be above 100, fasting blood glucose levels. And now your doctor will tell you that, hey, boss, you're pre-diabetic. So we should do something about it. They will still not tell you to change your lifestyle. What they will do is they will tell you to basically take glucose lowering medicines, which, by the way, will only mask the system because they do not address the insulin resistance that is driving it.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, you will go again for your annual checkup, and by then your blood glucose levels would be at above 126, and that's when you will be declared diabetic.
Yeah.
Being diabetic is independently, one of the biggest risk factors for cardiovascular disease and so many other diseases. But insulin resistance also has direct impact on multiple other metabolic disorders, cardiovascular diseases. Obesity and insulin resistance have a very close relationship, bidirectional relationship, by the way. Fatty liver, neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes, by the way. And in India right now, we don't talk about it enough, but there is a fertility crisis.
Yeah.
And by the way, that is getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
Insulin resistance and most common fertility disorders among men is erectile dysfunction, and among women it's PCOS.
PCOS, yeah.
They are the direct manifestation of insulin resistance.
Oh, wow.
So much so that there was a study recently that said that if a young person has an erectile dysfunction, they first of all, their chances of getting a cardiovascular event goes, much higher, and they're definitely insulin resistant. And 70% of the PCOS cases are because of insulin resistance.
Wow.
There are various mechanisms behind it, but to explain it simply, insulin resistance causes damage to your nerves through multiple pathways. It actually causes your blood pressure to go up because if you have high insulin, it will tell your kidneys to retain more salt. Again, if there is more salt, it will be followed by more water retention, which will constrict your blood flow, which will basically then have your which will make your blood pressure go up, which directly contributes to cardiovascular disease. So there are various mechanisms through which insulin resistance directly, causes cardiovascular disease. Again, for Alzheimer, it's basically the energy crisis of the brain. That's why it's called type 3 diabetes. Similarly, for erectile dysfunction, for a normal erectile function, your nerves need to dilate, and your blood flow. You need to have increased blood flow for the erection to happen. But in an insulin-resistant person, what happens is that for the blood vessels to dilate, you need nitric oxide, and insulin actually inhibits the production of nitric oxide, which means that your blood vessels don't dilate, and if your blood vessels don't dilate properly, there will be an erection problem. So, insulin resistance is the common denominator among most of the metabolic disorders.
Oh, that is damning. Apart from insulin resistance, you also talk about one sort of genetic factor, especially unique to South Asians, Indians, which is the thin fat phenotype. And can you explain for the viewers what the thin fat body type is? And also why the Indians are uniquely vulnerable to lifestyle or metabolic diseases because of that?
Yeah. I'll tell you a story. So there's a study that I've cited in the book. It's basically a study that was done in China.
Yeah.
They wanted to see and I'll answer your question, but I want to give this background first.
Yeah.
They basically wanted to study the effects of famine across generations. And there was a famine in China in 1950s or 60s. And this study, it was a fairly broad study. It actually looked at 2,000 people, and they looked at different generations of people who experienced that famine. The first generation, they call it F0 in their study.
Yeah.
The F0 generation are basically mothers who were expecting during that famine time. So basically, these mothers, they were pregnant, and they obviously faced starvation during that time. So that's F0 generation, and because they had to, keep the child alive, they adapted, and their genes adapted, and these are basically epigenetics. They're not, it's not a change at the DNA level; it's change at the epigenetic level. And then they looked at the children or the offsprings of the F0 generation, which was called F1. And they found, and the F1 generation, by the way, did not experience famine firsthand.
Yeah.
They were in the womb when the famine took place.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they were born, there was no famine. But still, they had 75% higher risk of developing diabetes. 75%. Then they went one level deep. They looked at F2, which is F2 generation, which is basically the offsprings of the F1, which means they were the grandchildren of F0. These kids were born much later.
Yeah.
No exposure to famine, nothing whatsoever. They were not even in the womb when the famine was taking place.
Yeah.
They had twice the risk, higher risk of having diabetes.
Compared to even F1.
F1 at 75%, which is much higher.
Which is much higher.
And F2, as compared to the general population, they were twice more likely to have diabetes.
Got it.
Why I'm starting with this story is because these famines, they've actually had a deep impact on our epigenetics. Now, coming to India, India actually went through a phase during colonial time of 190 years, which I think started in 1754 until 1947. During that 190 years, India faced 31 famines. That's roughly an average of one famine every 6 years.
Yeah.
Before that, famine would happen like once every 50 or 100 years.
Got it.
So we went through a period, and which was, by the way, because of the British policies, and that's a whole other topic we can talk about later. But we went through that period where there was a lot of scarcity.
Yeah.
And we developed what is called a thrifty genome type. What that means is that our genes are built for scarcity. At the time when there was less food.
Yeah.
And how our genes evolved, survival is really important, and our body is really smart. It wants to survive, and it will adapt. And one of the adaptations that happened was that our bodies learned to store more fat, because they knew that the famine will be coming, or they've gone through famine. So our bodies adapted to store more fat in case a famine comes. Then there's enough energy for us to survive.
Yeah.
Okay, and this, from that China study, it gets passed on from one gene to the other. The last famine that happened in India was actually in 1950s or something. So it's not that it's a very old story. It's actually quite recent. And we Indians and South Asians, and there are a lot of studies. There's another Dr. Chittaranjan Yajanik. I have actually cited a study in the book, who looked at newborn babies and Indian babies, and he found that Indian babies from birth, if you look at their body mass, they have more fat mass, less muscle, and more fat around their belly. So we are born with a predisposition to store more fat at the wrong places with the wrong fat cell characteristics. So that plays a really big role, because we are not living in scarcity anymore. We are actually living in the opposite of that. We are now in an abundance. So our bodies have evolved for a time in a world when things were scarce, but we now find ourselves in abundance, and we are eating 6 meals a day, and we order our meals on phone and they arrive in 10 minutes. So our genetics or our epigenetics are not designed for that.
Got it. I think we have talked about the problems. Let's switch gears to talk about the solution. I think you have mentioned 3 big rocks, which can help with the solution part of things. And also you have talked about 4-week program that a reader can take away as a solution. So let's sort of combine those two. And if you can help us understand, knowing our epigenetics and also our meal, like the quintessential Indian meal that we talked about, what is the easiest way if today I, as a viewer, decide that, okay, I need to get my markers in check and I become serious about my health? What do I need to do starting today?
Yeah. Look, first of all, I want to say that there are multiple things that you can do to improve your metabolic health, and I've covered the whole breadth in my book. However, many times if we have too many options, then we end up doing nothing. So I wanted to make sure that I simplify it as much as possible. In my book, I refer to a philosophy called Big Rocks Principle, which, by the way, I took an inspiration from a time management practice which is called Big Rocks Principle. Yes. Let me quickly explain what that means. What that means essentially is that, imagine that you have a glass jar and you have rocks, big rocks, then you have small rocks like pebbles, and you have sand. Now, big rocks represent your most important tasks that must happen.
Yes.
And then you have less important tasks that are your pebbles, and then you have, miscellaneous stuff, which is sand. Now, the big rock time principle says that, you will be most efficient if you actually place big rocks in the glass jar first, and then sand can naturally settle around it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you put sand and pebbles first, then there will be no space left for big rocks. So taking inspiration from that, I define the solution that I've defined is based on that. Basically, there are multiple things that you can do to improve your metabolic health, but there are 3 big rocks that will give you most bang for the buck.
Yeah.
80% of your metabolic health will improve if you focus on these 3 rocks. What are these 3 rocks? One is nutrition, which is obviously most important. Then you have activity, and then sleep and stress. And I can briefly talk about all of them, but basically these are 3 big rocks. I talk about supplements and all the other biohacking stuff you can do, but all of that is sand. If you don't get these 3 right, nothing else matters basically. So And why I chose these three as the three big rocks is simply because of, one, the frequency. We eat, most people eat anywhere from 2 to 6 meals a day.
Yeah.
Most people sleep every night.
Yeah.
And, we are doing some form of activity throughout the day. So frequency, right? Frequency has a big impact. Secondly, these three things have a direct impact on your insulin sensitivity. So these are my three big rocks. And I have very simple rules and protocols. There is an entire 4-week protocol in the book. But to keep it simple, with your nutrition, I have a very simple philosophy when it comes to nutrition, which is that, you need to, first of all, you need to control your carbohydrates.
Yeah.
That's carbohydrates are the only food group, or not only, they are the most insulinogenic food group.
Yeah.
So my number one rule is that control your carbs. Don't fear fats, and especially good fats. We have been living, under this fat phobia for the last, 3-4 decades, and that's completely wrong. Good fats should be part of your diet.
Yeah.
So don't fear fats. And the third principle is prioritize protein. If you follow this simple logic, you will get your nutrition right, and it will immensely, contribute to your metabolic health, in improving your metabolic health. I'm happy to go deeper later if you want, but let me just give you an overview.
Yeah.
So that's nutrition. Then activity is super important. As I said before, your muscles, they are the biggest glucose sink in your body.
Yeah.
So if you put them to use, they're going to have a big impact. So activity is really important. Now, if there is one, I believe, first of all, that the best activity or exercise is the one that you will consistently do. But if there is one thing that you want to take away from the book, it is that, do a 20 minutes walk after your meals. It has immense difference. I've tested this on my own continuous glucose monitor. I've mentioned that experiment in the book as well. I ate I don't recall the meal. I think it was typical Indian meal, 2 rotis with some sabji on one night, and my blood sugar. Rotis typically tend to spike my blood sugar quite a lot. I think it went, in 150 milligrams per deciliter. I had the exact same meal the next day.
Yeah.
But the next day, instead of sitting on my couch, I actually went out for a walk, a 20-minute walk, and I saw that there was about 20% reduction in my blood glucose levels. Same meal, everything same, nothing changed.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing else that you can do a 20-minute walk after your meal. That's the simplest thing.
Yeah.
But if you want to up the game, I think I'm a big fan of strength training. Simple reason being because strength training has a profound impact on your metabolic health. It has two advantages. One, if you use your muscles, you will grow your muscles, which means that you will have a bigger sink to dispose glucose, right? And then you will deplete your muscles as well, so your glycogen store will come down, and then there is more capacity for it to refill, right? So cardio is also great. I mean, do whatever you would do consistently, but for metabolic health, strength training is definitely far more superior. And then lastly is lastly is actually sleep and stress, and I think they're correlated. Stress plays a really big role in our metabolic health. Stress creates stress in our body, especially chronic stress, creates hormones in our body like cortisol, which directly oppose the effect of insulin. Insulin wants to bring the blood sugar down. Our stress hormones like cortisol or epinephrine, they want to bring the blood sugar up. So they directly oppose the effect of insulin. So if you're chronically stressed, then that will have a deep impact on your metabolic health. There are ways to manage stress. I have detailed protocol here. Something as simple as breathing exercise. I mentioned a 5-second breathing exercise in my book. You can, and that works beautifully well for an acute stress. But in the long run, it will also help with your chronic stress. You practice dopamine fasting that will hopefully bring the stress down. And one of the best ways to reset your stress is through sleep.
Yeah.
And most people underappreciate, because we live in this hustle culture, and we think that, especially in our younger days, we think, it's okay to sleep,
fewer
couple
hours.
of hours, every night, and it will be fine. But it actually has a lot of impact, because if you look at a sleep cycle, it follows a similar pattern. When we in the morning, when we wake up, right before our waking up, our body naturally produces more cortisol.
Yes.
And before we, and this cortisol spikes
Rises
in the morning,
and
then it starts coming down throughout the day, and in the evening it is at its lowest point.
Correct.
Right? And that is when melatonin would start to go up, and then melatonin will stay up at the early phase of your sleep, and then eventually that will come down, and then cortisol will go up. So when you have a sleep cycle that is not consistent, and and the research points that anywhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep is essential. When you have the sleep cycle that is disrupted, it has a big impact on your metabolic health. So these are the 3 big rocks of my protocol.
Perfect. One last question, and then we'll wrap up this interview. If you had to leave the viewers with just one tip, what would it be?
Oh, that's it.
Apart from read the book, but what else?
That's a tough question. But look, I think
it could be about the right markers as well to get tested. Yeah. Because I think, as you mentioned, that blood sugar is a lagging indicator. So if you can help us understand maybe 1 or 2 leading indicators, that'll be helpful.
I'm happy to talk about that. I definitely do have certain blood tests that I would recommend to everyone. But let me start this differently.
Yeah.
Look, I think I say this very often. You need to be the CEO of your own health. The system is designed to treat diseases. It is not designed to prevent diseases.
Yeah.
Okay. Doctors are a blessing, and I truly appreciate the work that they do. Because of them, my father is still alive. But most doctors, they treat disease.
Yeah.
And that's what they're also taught. So the system is designed to treat the disease, not to prevent it. So you have to be the CEO of your own health. And a lot of these metabolic disorders, people will tell you, or medical system will tell you that they are not reversible. That's absolutely not true. The reason they tell you that it's not reversible is because if you follow what the system tells you, which is take medicines, you are surely not going to reverse it by taking medicines.
Yeah.
Because medicines are there only to suppress the symptoms.
Yeah.
They will manage symptoms really well, and they do a really good job of managing symptoms. But they don't treat the disease, underlying disease. That is why when you are given a hypertension medication, you have to take it for your life. That is why when you're taken sugar medication, you have to take it for your life.
Yeah.
That is why you are given statin, which you have to take for your life to lower your cholesterol. And by the way, every couple of years, the dose keeps increasing. So think about it. The system is not they're not treating disease.
Yeah, it's self-perpetuating.
Yeah, they're not treating disease. They're only managing symptoms.
Yeah.
The underlying mechanism is still getting, from bad to worse, and that's why they have to keep increasing the dosage. Eventually, to a point where it is lethal, and you get a heart attack, or so the system is not designed for prevention, it is designed for treatment. So you have to take health in your own hand, first of all. So that would be my main message. But to end on what you asked me, if there is one test that I think everyone should do, which I don't understand why that is not part of the regular tests. Like I said, the regular tests, they include fasting glucose,
correct,
HbA1c.
Yeah.
They are the lagging indicators.
Yes.
Your blood glucose is the last thing that would go up. If you want to detect this metabolic crisis 10, 15 years earlier, check for fasting insulin. That's the most direct indicator of insulin resistance. And that is one test I think should be part of our regular blood tests. And if it is not, then be the CEO of your own health
and figure where it is being done.
Exactly, and test your fasting insulin.
Thanks a ton, Karan, for the conversation. I would love to get my copy signed from you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Karan.
Thank you.